We will now talk about this concept of why we build software at work and a job, right, when they pay us $100,000 a year. And the purpose of software is to create a simulation in software of a business domain. So there's a very critically important concept we need to understand now, and if you don't understand it, you won't understand everything else that's going on. Yeah, you might be able to copy and paste the code, and you might sort of get something that works, but if you do not understand the following thing that's going on here, you will not understand what we're doing. So first of all, let's talk about the idea of the business domain. So for your project, you will make a service-oriented architecture distributed application. To do this, you will need software engineering tools, which we're going to be using Unified Process, which is the most advanced, comprehensive software development methodology in the world, and it's the one you're going to be learning. I hope you're putting all this on your resume and your LinkedIn. 3 reasons we write software. The main one we do at work is to write software to deliver the business domain. So therefore, we need to understand what the business domain is. That will be your lab next week to take your assigned business domain and do an OOAD, object-oriented analysis and design on it. Another reason could be playing games or simulations, right, to learn more about how business or other processes work. You could write objects to simulate a situation. We're not going to get into that here, but you could. Or you could also do scientific calculation, numerical analysis. Again, we're going to be focusing on this one right there, the thing that your employers are going to want you to do. So key concepts: the business domain is a description of all of the key work steps and procedures, all of the business processes that run the business. Your job as a software developer is to create an object-oriented system which paints a picture, renders in software how the business domain works. And then, as we experiment with changing things in that simulation, we can learn about and optimize our business operation. That's how SAP, for example, enterprise domain simulation softwares like PeopleSoft or JD Edwards, that's how they work. They enable the business analyst to say, you know, what if we change this parameter? What if instead of giving our suppliers 20 days to fulfill an order, we give them 16 days instead? What if instead of holding inventory for 30 days, we hold it for 23 days? And what's the effect of that on our net profitability? Because if we make those changes, it may also have some cost. So then we can experiment in software without having to do things in the real world that might break the business. If we have done a good job of making a software simulation of the costs and expenses and incomes and cash in and cash out of all of the flows of our business, that would be a big win, right? We could work on optimizing the business without having to make real changes that might really have bad effects. So the way you achieve this is as follows. The way you do this is to do an object-oriented analysis and design on your business domain using UML. And we'll wrap this up as a lab in class next week when I give you your business domain. You're going to do that, and we'll call that one of our 5 labs. And the methodology that wraps this up, the methodology that this is referred to by is Unified Process. So your project is going to be to write software to deliver the business domain. So we'll be learning a software engineering methodology called Unified Process to figure out how to do this. So for next week, you all have this workbook. So please read this PowerPoint. I'll be talking about this next week, but it's fairly in-depth. And if you do a little bit of pre-reading on it, you're going to be way far ahead. So Unified Process works with a methodology called Agile. And maybe some of you have heard about Agile. And if you want to get a job as a software developer, it would probably be a good idea to be able to answer questions like this. I know when I was an interviewer at IBM, I would ask candidates coming in, young college graduates coming in for the co-op or the internship or the full-time placement. I would ask them about the literature of this job they wanted to work in. For example, if I was interviewing somebody, I might say, where does Agile come from? What's the origin story of Agile? It is that book right there. How Agile software engineering is done is according to that book, which is the Bible. It was written by Project Management Institute. It's an extension of the PMI body of knowledge for the specific use case of software design. The Project Management Institute has dozens of documentations on how to do various kinds of human industrial activities, healthcare, public sector, e-commerce, supply chain management. And this is the extension. In fact, what you can do on Kindle for about $30, you can buy this pair of books. So there's the Project Management Institute body of knowledge, and there's the extension of the PM BOK for software development, which is called Agile. Now, if I was interviewing a candidate, and I do sometimes, I have friends from IBM who went to form their own, talent recruiting agencies, and that's a pretty good thing. When you graduate, go and register for some of these agencies, and they take you and present you to employers. And they ask me to come in for a day to interview a bunch of candidates. If it was a software development job, and if I asked somebody about Agile, they indicated they had no idea what I was talking about, I would smile at them and say, you can go now. I figured out everything I need to know about you. So these are some things which are going to be in your notes, and you're going to have my encouragement to go ahead and start reading them and buying them and studying them and getting yourself amped up. Because if you're going to go to a job interview, and if you're going to tell the interviewer that they should hire you and pay you money, you have to earn the right to say that, right? You have to sort of train yourself up to the point where you've earned the right to ask that question, ask them to go and hire you, and they're going to say, why should I hire you? You better have your script ready. In fact, not related to this particular course, but I heard a young lady out there addressing some of the students about the whole career search thing. I have just put together a number of resources that I've been teaching over the last several years here of co-op and career prep, and I'm going to share it out with you, so I'll just kick it out right now for a couple of seconds, and then that's sort of not related to here, but that is related to the larger and more important final exam of getting the job. Whoops, I just clocked my Chrome. I killed all my Chrome browsers. All right, let's go and open them again. All right, so we were talking about the fact that the business domain is the collection of all of the business processes that run the business, and this is the reason why we need an object-oriented language like TYPEScript, because objects have what three things? Hello? Mr. Chatty, use your talking powers for good instead of evil. Share with class. Yes, you. What three things do an object have? What three qualities does an object have? Yeah, an object has what three things? Well, anybody, what three things does an object have in Java or any language? C#, any language, an object has what, and what? It has a unique identity, it has data fields, and it has methods. And a business process has an identity, which is the name of the process, data, and stuff that it does, actions or behaviors, which are methods. Therefore, UML is a fantastically beneficial language for connecting together, for drawing a description of our business domain, which we can project into object-oriented programming environment. You're probably not too sure what I'm talking about right now, but I have to get started somewhere, so that's the introduction. Now let's carry on. So your job as a software designer is to create object-oriented system, which renders in software how the business domain operates, and you do that doing an object-oriented analysis and design, which will be your lab next week. So next week you're going to actually do that and hand it in. The methodology we use to do this is called unified process. Your project deliverable is going to be a software application written in TYPEScript with a MongoDB backend data store. And you'll be learning a software engineering methodology called unified process. All right, we went and talked about how unified process is a wrapper around agile software development methodology. And unified process does all the rest of the stuff that Agile doesn't do by itself. Agile does the software engineering. But there's other stuff you need to do to deliver a software. You need to figure out the requirements. You need to forward generate the requirements into use cases. And then you forward generate the UML diagram to software. So this is the part Agile helps you with. And then finally, the last step you need is something called a traceability matrix we'll talk about later. So in terms of developing your project, you're going to be committing your code every week or every day or however often you're developing. So your development methodology will be as follows. So for next week, please take a look at my PowerPoints, because if you come to class sort of cold, not having pre-exposed yourself to a few of these ideas, could be quite challenging for you to get the lab done. And one of the reasons we teach students this stuff, if you don't understand the methodology behind how this stuff is done, you're going to be a post turtle. Years ago, we were driving up north. I saw, I guess, some mentally disturbed child. I don't know who would be stupid enough to do that, but they had put a turtle up on a post, and the turtle is going to die because they need to stay wet. They're aquatic animals. So I stopped. I took the turtle. Be very careful. Turtles, you might think, are harmless and cute. If your hand gets anywhere near its snout, it can snap enough to break your bones. So from behind it, and the turtle was in a pretty bad mood, understandably. So I just picked it up gently from behind by its shell, walked it down to the lake, and just sort of put it half in the water so it could find its way back home. But the reference to post turtle is that if you don't understand things like unified process, UML, and OOAD, if the only thing you're good for doing is copying and pasting code, you will be a post turtle. Somebody put you in a certain situation to get some code running, but you don't know how to do it by yourself. You don't know how to go, you don't know how to formulate requirements, right? Given a business description, you don't really know all the steps involved in getting to final working code. So therefore, you're a post turtle, which we don't want post turtles here. So unified process, this is like a pasta maker. You put the dough in here in the chute, you turn the crank, and the streams of pasta come out. So unified process turns problems or descriptions of requirements into fully working code. That all grew out of the software crisis of the 70s, which happened because programmers who did not understand the business domain were allowed to design the requirements of the system. Not a good idea at all. And when unified process was developed in the early 80s to fix that, the very first state of unified process is gathering user requirements. You put your developers and your users together in a room, and the users interview, or the programmers, the business analysts interview the users and figure out how the system should work, and then they collect user stories. They take the user stories and forward generate them into step 2, which is generating use cases, which is business process discovery, because a use case is a box into which you put a business process. Once you've got your use cases, step 3 is you forward generate use cases to UML. UML is a graphical description of a language, of a programming requirement, and UML shows you all of the entities or artifacts. It shows you all of the business processes as objects, and it helps you figure out which data fields and which methods to put in each object. And then step 5, the last one, is to make a traceability matrix. So you write all of your methods along the top row, you write your requirements down the left column, and wherever a requirement intersects with a method, you put a check mark. That's where you should put a test case, a test situation. And if you have any methods not connected to requirements, that's a dead execution path, right? Get rid of it. Maybe a developer started trying something at one point, didn't work, they did something else. So that lets you identify your dead execution paths. And it also lets you make sure that you can prove to your client that all of the requirements have been fulfilled, because you can show them the traceability matrix and show them which classes and which methods deliver which requirement. So anyway, unified process came out of the software crisis, and that's sort of the backstory of it. So go and read through the rest of this, right? Watch this video, lexical analysis. Watch this video, short introduction to unified process. The backstory here, several years ago, whoever's talking over there, please leave. I just want you to go. I don't want you here. If you're not going to listen to my story, you shouldn't be here. I developed this way of presenting this to students when I was teaching Capstone Project for mobile apps. And watch the video. I talk about all the things I just said, how unified process works. I was saying it in class, and the students were saying, Peter, talk slower, we want to write this down. So I made this video. Now, a couple of days after that, the Monday, that class ended on a Thursday. On a Monday, I got a call from one of the students in the class, phoned me, and she was screaming so loud I couldn't understand her. I said, Jaspreet, slow down, what's going on? So the story is, she said, I got invited to Rogers Communication for an interview. I said, oh, that's pretty good. What happened? She said, exactly what you said was going to happen did happen. The interviewer asked me, if we hired you and put you in charge of designing a new software application, what would you do? What would you say? What would be your answer to that question? You're in this nice building, right? You really want this job, and they ask you, how would you go about designing a software application? What would be your answer to that? Well, I actually told them, because I tell all my students this, shh, you and you, go. I want you out. You two just go. Go. Leave. Yeah, leave. Or be quiet. What's it going to be? Good decision. So anyway, I was an interviewer at IBM for several years, and if you think the job interviewer is there to be your pal and make you feel good, no. We were actually deliberately trained to make the candidate break down and start crying. That's what they're trying to do. Why? Because they're narcissistic sociopaths? Yeah, a lot of people who work in HR are, but also because there is a corporate policy, we don't really want nervous, emotionally unstable, unconfident people around. It's just not really a good idea. So they're trying to see if they were trying. I knew they were trying. What their goal was to get her to break down and start crying and run away. And then the interviewer could go, wow, I sure did a good job there, good for me. But she told me when they asked me the question, I did exactly what you said. I'd watched your video for a few days before. My roommates started telling me if they heard your voice one more time, they were going to throw my laptop out the window. So she said, when I heard the question, here's what happened. I took a deep breath and I said, well, Mr. Interviewer, thank you for the question. As you know, I'm a recent graduate of Cestar College, Lambton in Toronto, and we were trained to use a methodology for turning software requirements into solutions, which is called unified process, which starts with gathering all the users together in a room to collect their user stories. We forward generate the user stories into use cases to do business process analysis. We forward generate the use cases into UML diagrams to get objects with methods and fields. And then at the very end, we make a traceability matrix to ensure we have delivered all the requirements. And then she said, and Peter, exactly what you said was going to happen, what happened? Their mouth started hanging farther. So when I finished talking, she said, first of all, I realized I hadn't actually taken a breath in 4 minutes, and I didn't want to start panting in front of the interviewer, so I was just trying to sit there calmly and control my breathing. And then after a few minutes, he was like, So finally, I realized I better say something, so I said, Mr. Interviewer, I'd like to work here. Will you hire me? And he was like, So the power of this stuff, when you can say the right thing in the strong and confident way, and by the way, that's what's standing between you and getting the job, right? How good a show you do in the interview. And having some good, strong stuff to talk about and bring with you, well, unified process should be part of your repertoire. And lexical analysis, so the way we actually, the mechanism by which we study user stories and get to the requirements document. Lexical means word, analysis means study. So we do lexical analysis, which means we turn nouns into data attributes in the objects. We turn verbs or action words into methods. And we have a reproducible scientific methodology for going from description of business domain to working code. So anyway, go and read the rest of this. There's some other examples similar here. And then at the very end, I have a couple of slides where I talk about the kinds of things you're going to do here. Now, here's an example of unified process applied to a business domain, which is the library. What do we have in the library? Well, two kinds of objects primarily. We have borrowers and we have books. So we can model the books with their data, and we can borrow the borrowers with their data. And the powerful thing that makes unified process work is called responsibility-driven design. Responsibility-driven design. So that says, for example, here's an example to help you understand the concept of responsibility-driven design. Would it make sense for a book to be in charge of knowing about all the possible borrowers who might ever want to borrow that book? No, because how would the book know that? We can make a patron, we can make a borrower to be in charge of knowing about all the books they might want, but we couldn't possibly make a book to be in charge of knowing who wants to borrow it. And when you can understand that, you can understand the knowledge principle, responsibility-driven design. The object that knows the most about something should be the object that owns the behavior of controlling that business process. Right, so the object that knows the most about something, that has the best knowledge of it, is the object which should be in charge of delivering that process. So this helps you when you're doing your business analysis. You know all the business processes because they're described in the business analysis. You write them down. And I know there are all these fancy tools like Figma and stuff. Honestly, all I want you to use is a piece of paper and some colored pens. Because when you use the computer, you spend too much time playing with the computer and not enough time thinking about what it is you should be doing. So you write down all of the business processes in your business domain, and then you write down the data that they have and the actions that they have to do, and then you figure out which data and which methods to assign to which objects. And we have some special UML diagrams to help us do that. We have a CID, class interaction diagram, and object interaction diagram. And that's all stuff you're going to be doing next week when you do the lab and when you start working on your project. Yeah, so there's actually 5 kinds of UML diagrams, but those are the 2 I use most of the time. Class interaction, because what are the 2 ways of connecting classes in an object-oriented system? Is-a and has-a, composition and inheritance. A car is a collection of tires, doors, steering wheel, and so on. So that's composition. So has-a is composition, is-a is inheritance. A tiger is a feline. So class interaction diagram lets us model a shared field composition for association as well as inheritance. And object interaction diagram lets us model method calls between objects, right? Method choreography, method calls between objects. So anyway, all of this is a long way of telling you read the PowerPoint and also watch these 2 videos, Unified Process and Lexical Analysis. And this answers questions such as the following here. So UML in particular, class interaction diagram and object interaction diagram. So these 2 kinds of UML diagrams are what we need to identify or to sort of be able to do our OOAD, Object-Oriented Analysis and Design. So what objects do you need? Business processes in your business domain will become objects. And data attributes and methods, you'll get it from studying the business domain, applying lexical analysis, looking for nouns and verbs. How are the objects connected together? Composition and inheritance. All right, so this is a little bit of a backstory of how you're going to be setting up your lab. So now on the basis of our previous lecture, the reason why I said all that stuff was so you would understand why we need object-oriented TypeScript. Because unified process needs to work with an object-oriented language. It cannot work with a imperative language like Python or JavaScript. In fact, that's actually a big problem right now for artificial intelligence programming, which is done in Python, because Python AI programming is what we call probabilistic programming, not object-oriented. And they're still trying to find a good development methodology to work, as another requirement is to make more and more AI applications. But anyway, the point is we need an object-oriented language, so therefore we now have TypeScript. So for the project, yeah, we've already said what's going on with the project. We've talked about our lab next week for applying your OOAD skills. So we talked about the limitations of JavaScript does not have types or classes. Therefore, we cannot do UML modeling. So therefore, we cannot forward generate our code from a UML diagram. We cannot do UML domain-driven programming, generating objects from UML diagrams, because we don't have objects. Generating. So to do our project now, which is a service-oriented architecture distributed web application, we will be setting up multiple servers. Everybody's going to set up several servers on their computer, on their operating system. And therefore, we need to have an object, and we need to pass objects around. Not only we need object-oriented to do that, our SOA is going to work by passing around objects. And if we don't have objects, well, then you're pretty much out of luck, aren't you? By the way, I'm not sure if I got you going on this yet. I have a video I'd like you to watch for next week, which is my introduction to how service-oriented architectures work. I will kick that link out now.